My name is Lacey Leone McLaughlin, and this is the Season 2 finale of Unfolding Leadership. Joining me is my podcast producer, Nick Murphy. Today, you're going to have an opportunity to hear the best clips that Nick has selected. So it's a chance to hear why he put the episodes together the way he did, what he's been engaged and inspired by, and get a little bit of his personality as well, because he's such a foundation of the show and how we show up. Let's hear from our first acclaimed HR leader and my personal mentor, Ian Ziskin. Across the board, leadership is hard. You have been around, you've had more experience with more accomplished leaders than I think anyone that I know. Why is leadership so hard? Why is this hard? Why is this a tough gig?
Because fundamentally, you're leading human beings who are, unpredictable and in some ways selfish. I don't mean that in the completely pejorative sense. What I mean is that people have a tendency to focus on self-interest, for themselves, their careers. They want to make sure their families are taken care of. They want to make sure that the organizations that they're part of are successful. And that's messy. I think people are competitive as opposed to being as maybe more collaborative as I would prefer that they be. At least that's a little more consistent with my own style and preferred way of working. And I also think that leaders have a challenge because, especially in today's environment, we're really asking people to change almost everything simultaneously and very fast. And even if you're the most adventurous person on the planet, most people have some limit to the capacity for the amount of change and uncertainty that they can handle at any given point in time. And everything that we're doing in not only business, but in the world at large is challenging that notion because so many things are changing so quickly and people don't really have anything to grab onto or hold on to anymore that seems familiar and comfortable.
So what's the advice we give those people, recognizing that it's hard, recognizing there's a lot changing in the world and there's not a lot to hold on to? How do we help them through that?
Well, as you well know, because you contributed to this book, we had this experience of writing this book together in a highly collaborative way with a bunch of us over the course of the last couple of years called the Secret Sauce for Leading Transformational Change. And one of the things that I learned from that, for me, a big aha in being the lead author of the book is that, it is in fact true that people hate change. As cynical as that sounds, I came to the conclusion that most people actually do hate change. The only thing we have going for us is that they hate something else even more, which is failure. And so to the degree that you can cause people to feel like there's an opportunity to win, as a person and as a team and as an organization, maybe even as a community or society, winning involves doing some things differently and better than what we've historically done. I think you've got a 51% chance of getting even people who hate change to join in and be part of it, because nobody really wants to fail and nobody really wants to be part of a losing organization or team. And therefore, it's really all about what are the things that we need to do differently or better. The other thing, which I would emphasize from the experience of writing this book, is that human beings, for whatever reason, seem to have this limitless capacity to deny, deflect, dismiss facts or data that do not reinforce their preferred view of the internal or external environment. And one of our big challenges, I think, as leaders of any organization is to cause people to see reality. What is it that we're in the middle of in the moment that is causing the need for change, even though it might be uncertain or uncomfortable? If we do a pretty good job as leaders of bringing truth and reality to the perspective and mindset of the people who are around us, again, I think we have a 51% chance of getting over the hump of resistance to change. If we allow individuals as well as the organizations we're part of not to operate in reality and not to focus on the truth that we're facing. It's extremely difficult to get people to let go of whatever they've been doing for the past 20 or 30 years, even if it's not working.
To get us started, Nick, what did you think of that?
First of all, I think if people have a little energy to watch one episode of season 2, I think this episode with Ian is a great start. I think it's episode 2, and he is truly a genius. You guys play off each other so well. And actually, I gave this advice 2 weeks ago. This is real, of this change. People hate change, but people hate failure more. And the story is a good friend of mine got a new AI voiceover job. Very exciting. We're all excited. They're signing this big contract. It's like 5 or 6 days of recording. After the first 2 days, there's a lot of improv going on and burning this person out. The actors did not like this, but they had kind of set a routine of we're doing this improv for 10 hours. They called me and asked me my advice. And I really have learned a lot from this podcast. And I kind of went back to this, Ian, for real. And I said, look, go to the director. Obviously, the director doesn't want to change what they set up because, people don't want to change, like this clip you just saw. But the fear of failure of this project is going to suck if I get burned out and I can't do it, or that is more important. And that was a really positive thing that I shared. And this person was able to go and talk to the director and say, hey, super positively, I want this project to succeed. Let's figure out a way to change a little. And so I really felt this is a great clip.
Yeah, no, that's so funny because it does translate to all aspects of life. I think he's talking about leadership, but it's how we show up. It's how we engage. It's how we hang out with our family and our friends. It's all of these things. And it is true. Change is hard. And if it wasn't, we'd all be doing it more often and we wouldn't need any kind of personal development or insight, right? I also really like his very easy, non-judgmental way of saying, our instinct sometimes is to not deny, dismiss, and deflect, right? And we think about the things that we don't agree with or an opinion that's different than ours or something that is hard, and we deny, we dismiss, we deflect. I can't help but think about where we are as a world and a society right now where everything is so polarizing. And if we really kind of all took this in and said, let's focus not on denying, dismissing, and deflecting, and instead listening, that we'd all be better off today, particularly with where we head into the political climate moving forward for the next election.
Well, I have to say, perfectly placed because the next clip is about listening.
All right, let's hear it. Next up is Adult Swim CEO Michael Ouwleeen and television executive and equality founder Bree Frank.
One thing I underestimate is how much me talking can shut other people up, right? And it's because I'm just it's just me, you guys, it's just me. And I don't think of the title or even my job position at all. I'm just I'm just hanging out with you guys and we're figuring stuff out. So I made a conscious effort this year to, at the end of any meeting I'm in, no matter who the group is, to go, okay, I didn't hear from you. What is it? Or does anybody else have anything? I very consciously try to create a 5-minute awkward anything else, so that people know that they have, we need to hear from them. Mm-hmm. I'll do one-on-ones at the end and the beginning of any given year across all the groups that work here. And I keep notes. And so I try to do that twice a year.
So if I am a boss of a family-owned small organization and I'm hearing you and I'm inspired to put some humanity back into my workplace, or I am the showrunner on a show, or I am the CEO of a huge company, what do I do first?
I think the first thing you do is to ask people what they need. And that does not mean you're creating a democratic system within your organizations, because companies can't really function as a democracy, right? All rights can't be equal, but I do believe that understanding what people need in order to function and to be flexible as a leader and actually caring beyond and be no, we know your kids are important, and be can you take this call at 9 p.m. at night? You can't be a walking contradiction for your leadership. You have to say out loud how it is that you function and mean it beyond your mission. Show it, really show that you were serious about how important it is for people to have the little moments of their life outside of it. And that does not mean that you need to release deadlines or an assumption of obligation of duty. It does not mean that you will have ineffective workers, but you need to be especially in 2023, just be more flexible with your employees and trust that they will do the work.
So I put these two together because I thought this theme of while they're a little different, the theme of listening to your people, it kind of permeates through our whole show, both seasons. And I think for me, it's a big lesson. When I was directing, I had this musical that I directed for 4 years. That is mainly what I learned. And I really want to just note, basically people want to be listened to. And I think both in the content of the job and also in, hey, payroll is not processing my checks and I have, both of those worlds are just, hey, I'm hearing you and let's try to fix this together.
Yeah, it's interesting. Michael brings up one of the key phrases that I use probably 1,000 times a day in my coaching, which is anything else? What else you got for me? And giving people a moment to take a beat, process, and think. Because when you open up that white space, that's when the good stuff happens. But most of the time, we're all so focused on what we're going to say next or where we're going from here that we just don't leave space for people to think about that other thing that's not being said, or we don't leave space for us to listen and read between the lines. So I think it's a great point. I think both Mike and Bree really do a great job of talking about why it's important and the implications of not doing it well. And you can listen and impact the business positively. Neither one of them are saying, listen, be soft at the cost of business. No, they're saying, listen, engage, have conversations with your employees, and it's going to yield results and ultimately impact the bottom line. Next is executive producer of America's Got Talent, Sam Donnelly, and writer, director, and entertainment founder, Amy Aniobi.
There's always a fire to put out, right? There's always something that has to be done. So it's a case of prioritizing. So I need to prioritize that time with the team. I'm not going to give an example over what, because that seems rude, because everything's important, but prioritizing the time with the team where we sit around the table and we talk about, we're doing it later today, where we're sitting around and we're talking about stylistically how are we filming the show. Like, we haven't done that in probably 2-3 years of like, this is the afternoon where we're going to talk about, I love this clip. I love the way this is shot. What about this stuff? What about that stuff? And that's how we can keep moving the show forward and stop it from feeling stagnant. It's really easy to have your afternoon taken up by a myriad of other things that come in because you think, I'll just knock that out of the way. Mm-hmm. But that's like whack-a-mole. It never stops. So I think I want to stop letting other things get in the way of what is important. So getting the priorities right.
Mm-hmm. I think the number one thing I learned is that I needed an assistant. Like, I couldn't do it by myself. And I think that there's this feeling of like, I'm starting it, I'm doing it alone. And I can't, if I had to rely on myself to schedule meetings, I would never get work done. I would be scheduling all day because I'm a writer and I want every email to be quirky and original and fun and to have like jokes in it and to show my personality. I was wasting so much time at the beginning of marching out on this endeavor, trying to be ever present to everyone. And I realized like I needed support. I needed help. I needed time that I could blinders down, eyes on my paper, do the work. I needed time to turn off the other voices. And I know not everyone can have an assistant. That's not something that is available to everyone. But, AI is a powerful tool. There are AI assistants now. So I'm like, maybe get one of them. But I think Calendly is a great tool, not to give them that. But there are so many ways that you can figure out how to schedule your time. And I was drowning. I would say like I would wake up and I'd be like, okay, let me just answer some emails. And then suddenly the sun would be going down. And I'm like, oh no, all I did today was answer some emails. And I'm like, I have to work. So yeah, that's the biggest thing is get some support as soon as you can.
For me, I am very bad at this. I feel right with these people I answer emails, I play so much defense, and then offense, I have a sliver of 20 minutes. And I have to say I am horrible at this, and I'm inspired by them. I want to change because I feel like, there's so much online of time blocking and deep work and all that stuff, but you got to get it into your bones.
Yeah. And how have you gotten it into your bones? What have you done?
Mostly through the calendar, but I'm not good at it. I as an ADD kind of crazy person, I really try to put in the calendar, this is time to do this. And I even would say, Lacey podcast edit, 2 hours. It's just, I do struggle with it because I worry about the fight, like exactly like Sam said. There's always fires, and you kind of have to just let them be a little bit.
You creatives are hard to nail down, I tell you. No, I'm kidding, of course, because you do a great job and you always get things done. But I think that the consistency and something that's helpful for you as well. I know you work on teams, whether it's this team to produce this podcast or when you're working on plays or when you're working on other projects. I know you're part of a team. And I think the messaging from both of them comes from asking for help. How do we think about how we manage our time? What's our intentionality in terms of what that looks like? Who do we involve? What is the best use of my time? And spending that time processing, thinking about it for a couple of minutes, and then getting all that time back when you do it right.
What is the tactic around, I'm going to reach out and just say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. What would that little bridge be?
Yeah. So I think the conversation is, hey, here's what's on my plate, or here's how I'm thinking about work, or here's what we need to get done. I'm struggling to figure out what takes priority, or what are the things that you could step in and help so we could accomplish all of this.
It reminds me a little of Ian, of change. I don't want to fail, so let's do a little change.
Exactly. It's exactly it. Is how do we adapt and adjust to get it all done in a way that works for all of us and delivers results for the project, the show, the podcast, the thing, right? Next, we have beauty executive and founder, Melanie Bender.
What you're looking for is the intersection of, what is the goal and vision that you want to take on, and what are those unfair advantages that you have? And that will lead you to a very specific starting point. And I think, in general, when you have those huge plans and visions, it starts very specific. You don't take on the world overnight. So don't feel like you need to address everything with the first initiative or the first launch or even the first vision deck. Know that it is a stepping stone process to get from, let's say, the first pair of eyeglasses you launched to Warby Parker. So really letting yourself think big and know where you want to get to, but also pushing yourself to get specific and get really realistic in how you start taking those steps. And also really pushing yourself to think about what are your strengths? What are the idea of onlyness? What are the things that only you can do, that only you bring? And those things together, I think, point to that winning end zone, at least for the first thing that you take on.
Yeah, if I break that down for myself, it's almost like think big, start small, know the value that you add.
Exactly. And I think that last one is critically important because there are things that I have done that, other amazing leaders couldn't have taken on because I didn't have some of the background and knowledge, and vice versa. So not getting caught up in who other people are, what other people have done. Sure, learn from them, learn from, what's worked for them, learn from their challenges, because there will be them, but ultimately, get really informed and real about the strengths and advantages that you bring. And that's what you want to be building for. Earlier on in my career, sitting down and having my amazing leader at the time speaking to the whole company. And I remember looking back up at her and thinking, I'm never going to be as inspiring as she is. I don't know how I ever get to that. And it was true that I was never going to be her. But what I think I wasn't leaving space for at the time is who could I be? And by letting myself lead naturally where I have strengths and passion, I found those areas.
I included this clip because I actually, even before the episode was out, I shared this clip specifically with my girlfriend who's going through some work transitions. And we had a really amazing talk about this onlyness quality around, well, what are things that you are specifically built for with all of your strengths and weaknesses? And actually, Frank from, I think, episode 6 talked about go to all of your friends and ask them who you are, because they might have a different idea of you than you. And it was, I thought, really useful, because even in podcasting, I feel like, what's my own, you can throw a rock in the city of Los Angeles and hit 1,000 podcasters. So it feels like, who am I? And it's something around humans and interconnectedness and that, but I really just was very inspired, truly inspired by this clip of Melanie.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm figuring out why you keep doing this podcast with me. I think you're getting all of the tips and trips and then just like sending them out to friends and family.
I'm our number one fan.
That's awesome. That's great. That's really fun. I'm glad they find value in it because these leaders do bring a ridiculous amount to the table. But I loved her think about the unfair advantages that you have. And she's talking about what we as self bring to business as a distinctive advantage. And we're like, I have this thing that makes me special. It's unfair to you, and I'm going to utilize the heck out of it, which I love it. Unfair advantages of what we bring to the table. It's such a unique concept, but you can tell it permeates in all of the way she thinks about the work she's done, the companies she's founded, and the success that she's had. I also really like, and I know this is something that Ian says, which is the think big, start small, and then his is move fast. And that's the thing that I think people can really get their arms around, because so often we get stuck in our own way because we want to think big, do big things, and take all the time in the world to get it right. And that's where we get stuck.
Again, I'm getting chills. I feel that is really, really interesting advice for the world of 2024. I think a lot of people think big and move slow. The opposite.
And that's what we have to think about, right? So the first thing I talk to with those leaders about mostly is, okay, you've got this vision, you've got this thing that you want to go do, whether it's a startup, it's entrepreneurial, or it's a large organization in the Fortune 50, right? It's how do you take things and make it actionable? How do you take those steps tomorrow that move the mission forward in a real way? How do you do things that allow people to get inspired and engaged and also take action if you're actually leading teams or rather than just yourself? And last but not least, finance executive and equality founder, Todd Sears.
You think about what you would leave somebody listening to this podcast with, whether they're that person who isn't connecting what they want to do with their values, or they're sort of sitting and thinking, what is their role within the organization? Or they're sitting there thinking, gosh, I wish I could be more honest about who I am in the workplace. What are your final thoughts for them?
I think it may sound trite, but life is too short to be miserable, and optimism and happiness get you a long way. And if you're not happy in your situation, which could be driven by not being out, by not having a purpose, by not feeling supported by your organization, whatever it is, change it, right? The opportunity to be authentic to yourself is, I think, your most important obligation to yourself. Because if you're not authentic to yourself, you'll never be authentic to anybody else. And life success, career success, however you define it, comes from that. And I think ultimately happiness comes from that. And that would be my advice. I don't think it can be too prescriptive, but authenticity is what I think drives happiness.
I know this is a business podcast, but I really do say, kind of as our number one fan who's watched all these episodes and been with you a long time, I'm just really inspired by the crew that you've assembled of all these people. You know, all these people are within your network, and you, I think. I know it is going to make you uncomfortable, but I really feel like these are all people I would love to work for. And they're all people like, even Todd, it's like, what a sweet thing to say. That's his advice.
How do you go wrong with focus on happiness? I love that life is too short to be miserable, right? So you think about the stories, you think about what we heard from Todd that day, and it's how do you bring it all together to feel inspired about the work you do, have an impact, and make sure it connects with who you are as a human. What else can you say to that, right? I mean, the message is pretty dang clear.
Totally.
Well, that's it for season 2. Sincerest thanks for all of the enthusiasm and listeners of this podcast. We wouldn't be here without you today. With that, the question always is, when is season 3? Will there be a season 3? And you know, truthfully, I don't know. We're going to see where this goes. We're going to see what we think, and we're going to see who I'm inspired by to bring to the world. May your journeys towards leadership be more efficient and effective. I know it's not an easy road, but keep doing what you're doing. Adapt, adjust, learn on the way, and don't be afraid to try something new. As we talked about today, change is hard, move fast, start small, get it going.